Are you looking for a Dynasty trade calculator that aligns with your own values? Because if you are, then I have the app for you, the Dynasty GM. The Dynasty GM's Dynasty Trade Calculator lets you run trade scenarios through the app that align with your own values by allowing you to input your own rank set, the Dynasty Nerds rank set, or your favorite analyst rank set. This is going to make sure the trades align with your values to make sure you're getting the best end of the deal possible. Go ahead and download the app for free in your app store.
Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Rich Dotson. He's Matt O'Hara.
Hey.
Sick Matt O'Hara. Very sick.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
And Garrett Price.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. But you and I are doing better than Matt. You know, if you sound like, hey, did you guys bring Rich's grandpa out here to talk Dynasty Fantasy Football? And they're like, hey, that's not funny, kids.
Listen, this flu that is going around is no joke. All right, I've been down for like an entire week. So I missed last week's show because this was just starting and it's really not even 100% gone yet. So hooray.
Yeah, Tuesday morning we record on Tuesdays, and you texted, you said, hey man, just heads up, like I'm not feeling too good, but you know, we'll see how I feel later. And like 5 hours later, like, yeah, this is way worse.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah, I'm almost dead.
It was
we had a
bad.
shorter podcast last week. You know, you take the good with the bad. You take the good with the bad. So
right.
We'll try and keep your opinion to the minimum, and I'll just talk a little bit more, I guess.
Rich needs more airtime.
He really does. Yeah. No, I usually come on here and hog it all up. So no,
right.
Rich, you take your well-deserved.
Listen, there's a lot of talk about on this show. We're talking about wide receiver buys and sells, right? Like it's February. Like you're sitting here, the Super Bowl's over. This is we're inching closer to the league new year at this point. That's our countdown. So we're about a month away from the league new year. That's when free agents are going to sign. We'll know where T. Higgins goes, right? We'll see if J.K. Dobbins can stay with the Chargers, things along those lines. We're going to find out here soon. So over the next month, how do you want to play Dynasty over the next month, right? Like, do you want to get into the Dynasty Nerds film room and just watch film and get ready for this rookie class?
Yeah.
Do you want to take a month off? Do you kind of want to just like listen to some podcasts? Like, you know, you got about a month till things get cooking, but remember, you know, like those just, let's say stagnant, get passed up, and this is your opportunity to make moves when nobody else is doing it. And sometimes like just the excitement of like, you know, like everybody's kind of been really like the regular fantasy season just ended not too long ago, and you're sitting here and you're like, you want that break, right? Now the Super Bowl's over and there's an off season for us for the rookies. Sometimes just getting an offer in somebody's like inbox like can perk them up a little bit. Like, oh, look at this little negotiations here in February.
This league's not dead for the entire offseason. All right.
Those are the fun leagues, right? Like there's no more football to watch. Look at your dynasty team. Like, how can I make my team better? So we mentioned last week.
Send a trade offer today.
Dude, I love it. I love sending like I try to send now, mind you, I'm in 20 dynasty leagues. I try to send one trade a week. Like I really do. Like it could be negotiating around draft picks this time around. Just trying to solidify a position. Maybe just grab a guy who I think might have some depth, some upside, enter free agency or via free agency. A guy like Juwan Johnson, right at tight end. Like it doesn't seem like he'd be very expensive right now, but hey, man, you know, like he's going to be a free agent. If he ends up somewhere, usually if you're a free agent, you're going to get paid. If he gets paid a little bit, he becomes the focal point of offense. He's athletic enough. He's good enough to go out there and do it. Definitely signed somewhere in like Denver, you know, which Coach Sean Payton coming out and saying, hey man, like I'm not really worried about receiver we need. Like I'm really focused on getting like a tight end and running back. Like that's in the history of Sean Payton at tight end is very encouraging. You know, you hear the news today of the new offensive coordinator in Seattle, and he says he's just sitting there gushing like it's like his love interest, and he's trying to ask him to prom about Kenneth Walker, like just everything, like how his zone run scheme, which is what Kenneth Walker
right after we talked
in.
about selling him.
Yeah, exactly. He comes out like and just gushing, and it's like meanwhile Zach Charbonnet is like the guy who kicked his cat, right? Like he's not even mentioned. He's not even mentioned. So it's like, so it's for some people not catching that news, right? They're tuned out in the dynasty season. Definitely with the season ended and Kenneth injury being hurt. that might be a prime window to sell Zach Charbonnet, right? Like some people might hear the news, some might not, but you might be able to better your dynasty team by just getting ahead of that for a coach to openly come out and gush for somebody who I believe is a better running back and a guy like Kenneth Walker. So we're not doing running backs.
Did you see who got added to the Dolphins staff today? Bobby Slowick.
Oh, I saw that.
Coordinator.
Passing game coordinator.
Ooh, I like that quite a bit. Reunited from their days in San Francisco. Like, I like that.
Yeah, you always got to let people get fired for not doing a good job.
Hey, I don't think that's why. He was a hot commodity potentially for head coach last year.
I mean, dude, just when you think like you're living in this world and like, hey man, dude, what a time to be alive. This is nuts. Like everything around me, everything I believe in, like everything's on tilt. And then here we see Ken Dorsey gets hired as offensive coordinator in Dallas. And you're like, just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, they had a guy who like made Josh Allen and the Bills offense look terrible, right? And then he gets fired and they immediately look tremendously better with Brady. The Browns hire Ken Dorsey, and they literally have one of the worst offenses in the history of the NFL for a team that previously had gone to the playoffs and had a great run with Joe Flacco, the worst offense I've ever. So Jerry Jones, he goes out there, he hires Schottenheimer. He's like, who am I going to hire? Ken Dorsey. What a world. What a world.
Did he get offensive coordinator? I thought it was just like a unspecified role.
I don't care if it was the role of ear whisperer. Just like pipe down, Ken.
Ear whisperer.
You could have beat the Buckeyes in 2002 with Andre Johnson and Willis McGahee and Ed Reed. Get out of here, kid.
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything because I had been down for a week. So I missed some things. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Sometimes I read things and I just kind of like I remember them a different way. So if it's a slightly different read. Anyway, he got hired. The word said offense, like no bueno. Come on. Oh, it's like waking up in a Walking Dead in my cot. Like I'm in a whole new world. Like what's going on around here? Ken Dorsey.
I low key, this is like a weird take, but I low key would love to live in the world of The Walking Dead for like a week. I think that would be like super fun. Now I don't want to live there forever, but like for a week, I think it'd be low key.
You think you could make it for a week?
I want to try. Like I want to try. Like I'll cook beans and shoot a crossbow and like do whatever I got to do to survive.
Dude, strongly disagree.
I think just go in the middle of nowhere in like Canada in the middle of summer when it's not like
I don't
butt
get to
cold.
shoot zombies.
You can just pretend that the animals are zombies. It's the same damn thing. You're so isolated.
They are so much faster than zombies. Zombies are super slow. I want to get a barbed wire baseball bat and just go to town. Flunk. Let's do it.
Strongly disagree. And I'm a huge zombie fan. I think I've watched every zombie movie ever created, like since I was like little. I think that sounds like
World War Z. World War Z zombies. No, thank you. Those ones would not be fun. They are very fast.
Yeah, but you'd always be out like you say it like you're out there cooking beans, telling stories to the kids. Meanwhile, you're like on edge, afraid to go to sleep because you don't get bit by some zombie. So you're like, you can beat them. Like, oh, dude, like, for a week. That's not
for
fun.
A week.
Be on edge,
I'll make it work for a week. I don't want to live there forever. 1 week, though.
I don't see my friend Garrett seeing a real life zombie going, hey, I'm gonna go hit that guy in the head with this baseball bat. Like, listen, I'm not saying you're athletic and you're not like the next Jose Canseco, but like, what if you football? What if you strike one on him? That's a big trouble.
What if you strike one?
I completely
mom's real life.
Dude, you don't get a strike two in that one, man. You better make contact.
That's right.
I played baseball for years. I'm pretty sure I could hit a human-sized object.
Listen, just watch the shows, Garrett. We're getting too far ahead of ourselves. We're 9 minutes in. We talk some football. We talk some zombies, which, listen, if we had a different show, I would sit here and talk zombies for 2 hours.
I'm going to put a poll out right now.
Even a scenario of, like, what would you do? Because I've dreamt about this since I was, like, 6, right? Like, I was going to write a book on it. I swear to God.
It would be fun. I'm telling you, for 1 week. Look, just get, like, a VR version and try it out. Like, that gives you, like, 50% of the feel.
I miss my fan. I miss hot showers. I miss sleeping comfortably. Yeah, it's a long time. It's 7 days, bro.
I've been on missions trips where it's hot and no air conditioning. Now
I think the most I've ever stayed up straight is like 40 hours, man. That'll be a week of not going to sleep unless you're sleeping up in a tree. Anyways, We're talking wide receiver sells. We're not talking what would you do in a zombie apocalypse for a calendar week. So let's just dive into it. No more fun and games. Let's have some fun and let's play some games with these wide receivers.
No more fun and games. To the fun and games. To the fun and games.
So we had a Nerd Herd show last week, and it started off with like me and Garrett, like, hey, where are you on Jaden Reed? And the Jaden Reed discussion kind of led into like other receivers we had in that area. And both of those players kind of like, after talking about them, I did a little bit more in depth looking into that, kind of carried over this show. And my wide receiver buy, who I liked and you and I kind of discussed in depth on the Nerd Herd episode, is Jerry Jeudy. And, you know, Jerry Jeudy's coming off a wide receiver 1 year. This is absolutely fantastic, guys. Like, even now that Deshaun Watson's out of the picture, like, dude, his stock's higher than like Deshaun Watson's waist mid-towel at a masseuse. Like, this is everything can't get much better for Jerry Jeudy. And listen, I know those Jameson Winston, those weeks. Yeah. Jameson Winston weeks were pretty good. Outside of that, he had a terrible quarterback situation. Like, literally one of the worst of all time in the history of statistics of quarterbacks. Like, and that goes back, people like didn't even have face masks. So just imagine how rough that was to even throw the football. So when you look at Jerry Jeudy coming up a year as wide receiver 12, his ADP guys right now is wide receiver 34 overall. So he's going in startup drafts is pretty much as like a very low-end wide receiver 3 for a 25-year-old kid that's going to turn 26 years soon, coming off a wide receiver 1 season. And you can't say, hey, guys, like this was Jerry Jeudy's breakout year. Like, this is where it all worked out for him, and it's all been kosher. He's done this before. He had a breakout year in 2022, his 3rd year. He was wide receiver 19 overall in points per game. So this is somebody with first-round pedigree, very savvy route runner who comes into Cleveland, and he is the number 1 receiver, right? Like, he's a number 1 receiver on the Cleveland Browns. There's nobody coming in here to compete with him. The Browns don't have anybody to sign anybody. They're going to hope on Cedric Tillman. Maybe they can bring Elijah Moore back because he knows the system. But Cedric Tillman's likely wide receiver 2, and you got David Njoku. So they're not going to take Ted McMillan that high. And coming up the season that he had a really good year for somebody who historically, you know, Jerry Jeudy's had at least 20 to 23% of a target share in this season when he's fully healthy. And, you know, his big thing has been drops. He kind of overcame that a lot this year. Real good player, yards after the catch. When you look at some of his statistics there, his yards after the catch stats here were 2.3 is what I have down here. And when 2.3 yards per reception was one of the best in the leagues. Like, you had Jamar Chase, who led the league at 2.38. Then you had Tyreek Hill at 2.29. Then you have CeeDee Lamb at 2.17. And Jerry Jeudy was 4th in the league in yards per route run. So with that, okay, he has that. He's top 4 there. Even yards after the catch with Jerry Jeudy. 6.5 yards after the catch in 2024. Came in 12th overall. So he's a wide receiver 1 in that category too. So it wasn't like he just did this and he came in just peppered with targets. Like, he caught the ball. He got the ball in his hands and he made plays. And he truly looked like that on the field this year. And it's kind of hard to see in Dynasty when you have these players that come in and what do you want to do? You want to see that year 3 breakout, usually by then. If it comes into year 4 for somebody with first-round pedigree in a Jerry Jeudy who's a very good router and who knows how to get open, which shows, again, on his yards per reception, you don't see very often that player at 25 going on 26 years old who just finished as a wide receiver 1 and has already had a wide receiver 2 year just be valued as a wide receiver 3 overall. So I'm not sitting here saying either like Jerry Jeudy has broke the mold. He's a wide receiver 1 going forward. I'm not saying that. But I think it's very easy to match his 2022 totals here in Cleveland just by being the number 1 targeted player here as it is, and finishes wide receiver 19, which is a mid-range wide receiver 2, which is a championship caliber player. So in Dynasty and in February, right around now when people are thinking about draft picks as well, is what are you doing? Always you're trying to find really good value. And if I can get, 15, a player I value as 15 spots higher than these other wide receivers that the community values, I'm going to try and go ahead and grab him for that wide receiver 34, 33 value, a very late first if I need a receiver. Definitely a class that isn't really strong at the receiver position. And I haven't dove into the receiver tape, Garrett. I know you probably have more than I. But that's the guys for
Not an
me.
amazing class, no.
Yeah, but for me, like I don't see that kind of value present itself very often when you want to get a cornerstone piece. So to get him for that price and you slide him into your wide receiver 3 role, then you're in a really good spot to compete in 2025.
Yeah, listen, Jerry Jeudy, I think, had an excellent year. I think this is a great opportunity to go out and get him because I think everything you just said makes perfect sense, Rich. They're not going to – the Browns have negative $27 million worth of cap space right now. They're not going to go out, spend money anywhere in free agency, let alone add on to a position where they really got Jeudy at a pretty good value. You know, they traded a 4th-round draft pick or whatever for him and then signed him to an extension before he did anything. So he's on a pretty team-friendly deal there. So I think they feel like that is kind of locked down. They got what they need there with between him and Tillman, and you know they'll draft another guy, I'm sure, in the 3rd round or some 4th-round draft pick type of guy because they seem to love to do that here in Cleveland. But Jeudy is, I think his situation can't get worse than it was this past season when he performed at those numbers. So I do think no matter what they do in Cleveland at that quarterback position next year, it's going to be better than it was this past year. So
and I think sorry,
go ahead. No, you're good. Go ahead.
And what I think too is, one of the most likely scenarios pointing to the Browns at quarterback, no matter what they do, say even they draft a quarterback at 2 potentially, would be to bring in Kirk Cousins, right? Kirk Cousins wants to play for a team that could possibly compete. The Browns could possibly compete. Very familiar with Kevin Stefanski, obviously being his offensive coordinator for so long in Minnesota. The Browns don't have cap space. They'll be able to pay Kirk Cousins the league minimum. So if you could say he's the number 1 option and, you seems like the most likely scenario there right now, what does that mean for Jerry Jeudy? Kirk Cousins has supported a wide receiver 1 7 times, I think, over the last 7 years. In 2016, he had 2 wide receiver 1s, then 2017, 2020, 2022, 2023, 2024. So if Kirk Cousins comes in with his route run savviness, Kirk Cousins would be a fantastic match to match up him just for earlier in the year.
And for the record, that is absolutely who I see, or kind of how I see that scenario playing out ideally for the Browns. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it works for the player and for the Cleveland Browns, and I think that would be their best case scenario. So go ahead, Garrett. Sorry.
No, you're good. We talked about this a little bit on the show. I'm still in a little bit of prove it mode for me with Jerry Jeudy before I'm really willing to buy in. This was a guy that it was his 5th year, never had 1,000-yard receiving season up to this point. And Jameis Winston, I know that he wasn't the full season quarterback, but he started the most games for the Browns at any quarterback last year. And he's super, super friendly for fantasy football wide receivers, throwing up 400 some yards a game. Doesn't matter how many picks I have, I'm chucking it. And so that's really, fantasy friendly. That's when we saw Chris Godwin and Mike Evans have a huge run there in Tampa Bay. So I get it. Like Kirk Cousins would not be ideal. I think he could have a good season there, but even there, the receivers were very hit and miss this year with Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. We'll see who they bring in. There's a few different options that could be there. Some of the rookies, things like that. So for me, I'm not necessarily saying sell Jerry Jeudy because I think for me, he's more adequately ranked. So like he's more of a hold for me at this point. But I get it. If you want to play the upside game, I think it's there. I just don't know the quarterback situation is going to be as friendly or not.
Well, hot news for you, Hot Shot. I'm always playing the upside game.
Always.
Who's next on your guys' list?
Go ahead, Matt.
We do it. Yeah, we're doing sells, right?
Whatever you want, man.
All right. I did a buy. You could do a sell. You could offset me.
I thought that's what we discussed. No, I'm going to go to my buy. I'm just messing with you. So my wide receiver buy here is a guy, Rasheed Shaheed. I feel like everyone has kind of forgotten about this guy a little bit. Obviously, last year only played in 6 games before he injured himself. So his numbers aren't going to look great. He was wide receiver 86, blah, 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 blah. But, before he got injured, which is what we really care about as far as his numbers, weeks 1 through 6, which would include the week he was injured, which wasn't a great week, he was wide receiver 22. Prior to that, he was wide receiver 17. That included a week where he got a goose egg. So, like the guy's potential is pretty high. he can week in and week out touch wide receiver one numbers, pretty easily. He's that kind of explosive of a player. And the injury, it was nothing serious. It was a meniscus injury. He had to get it repaired. It's a 4 to 6 month kind of window. So he missed the remainder of the season because it was a mid-October type of thing. And he's really kind of coming out of that now. Like he's at the front end of that 4 months out. So the next couple months, he's going to be fully cleared no matter what, like the worst case scenario. And for me, I went in and just wanted to check to see what kind of value there is out there. If there's anybody in the trade finder, what kind of trades have been out there. And it really solidified it when I put him in the trade finder, and literally nothing. There's been no trades with this guy. It's almost like people have forgotten about him. And he's a 26-year-old guy. He'll be 27 next August, so right before the season starts. So he's kind of like right in the prime of his career. I know there's a lot of turnover happening there in New Orleans, but with the new offensive with not the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore going there as head coach, we know that he can get a smaller guy like Rasheed Shaheed who's fast. We know we can get him involved. We just saw him do it in the Super Bowl with some nice explosive plays by Devontae Smith. So I feel really good about him going forward. I think he's going to be healthy in plenty of time to do all the offseason stuff here and really get himself acclimated to the new playbook. And there's no one else really there. They don't similar to the Browns, they don't have money to spend. They're $51 million over the cap in New Orleans. So I think it's going to be a lobby. It's going to be Shaheed. They're kind of band-aid it together with some of those guys that they ran out towards the end of last year. But it is going to be those guys kind of taking on the brunt of it for whomever. I think it's going to end up being Carr because they don't have much of a choice, but we'll see. They might end up just trying to kind of finally take a hit here on some of this stuff and clear out some of the bad contracts that they have. But it's not going to be Shaheed. So he's going to be there, and I think he's going to be a valuable asset. He's not a guy that you want in your starting lineup every week. He's not one of those guys, but he's a fantastic number 4 or 5 wide receiver to have on a team when you're starting 3. He's going to get you through bye weeks. He's going to get you through injuries, and you're going to feel really good putting him into your lineup. So I think he's a guy to go out and get, just because he might even be able to be a toss-in on another deal. He might be a guy that just you don't necessarily have to give up a second-round draft pick. You might be able to get him just thrown in and like, all right, give me Shaheed and the deal's done type of thing. So right. That's why I like him, because I feel like he's kind of flying really, really far under the radar right now.
Yeah, I like Rasheed Shaheed a lot. Very, very dynamic playmaker. I love him, especially in best ball type of formats, because those you don't really care about the off weeks as much as long as he has the boom weeks. But even in season long, this team is desperate for playmakers on the offensive side of the football. And if we've learned anything about Chris Olave over the past few years, it's that he's gonna get hurt at some point. Like, it happens every year. He's kind of become the Kenneth Walker of the wide receiver position. Like, there's just one way or another, he finds a way to get hurt. And so now, granted, I know the reason that Shaheed is a buy is because of his injury, but before that, he was pretty consistent. And they need to give somebody the football. Alvin Kamara is no spring chicken. Their draft picks, they're going to have to address so many different positions. I don't see them prioritizing the skill position offensive players unless just the right guy falls to them. So I like it. I think it's a worthwhile venture, and you're right, it's real cheap.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Price, again, value goes back to value where you can find it. And Shaheed, who's he's a big game player, right? A really good deep threat, really good hands, still could run some good routes, and has gotten better every single year he's been in the league. If you get punt return points, he's the number 1 scorer, pretty much theirs too. Like, if that counts in some of your guys' leagues. And you mentioned it, like, this is a team that has so many needs that they can't go out and sign anybody, right? And like you said, this is not a strong wide receiver class. Can't really see them drafting a wide receiver in round 1. And that leaves you Chris Olave, like Eric said, gets hurt all the time. And that's it. Taysom Hill, most likely going to be off this roster this year. Juwan Johnson's a free agent as well. So it's really going to be for a team that's going to be struggling probably on both sides of the football. They're going to throw the football. Shaheed's your most high likely, like Matt said, to be a high end like wide receiver 4 that gives you wide receiver 1 weeks, right? So for me, I think he's a fantastic value, somebody who's on my radar as well.
All right, we good?
Yes, you gotta give us a guy.
Well, I was just making sure nobody else had anything to say. So my guy here that I'm going with, young player, not even 23 years old yet, and former second round pick, and his dynasty ADP right now is pretty low. You can get him roughly in like the 12th to 13th round. So you're going to get him pretty cheap. But I was really, really impressed with what I saw at the end of the year from Marvin Mims. This is an offense where we saw Bo Nix come into his own over the course of the season. But you look at their other receiving options, and we may or may not be getting to another player in this offense later on in the show. We'll see. But you look at the receiving options. You got Courtland Sutton, who good player, big-bodied receiver, had a good season. And then after that, that's really it. They're probably going to be drafting a tight end at some point this season. But what this guy did at the end of the year, he basically put the team on his back. From week 12 on, he had 6 touchdowns in the receiving game. 2 games where he had over 100 yards receiving. And by the end of the year, it wasn't just like the gimme gadgety stuff. In that Cincinnati game, 8 targets in that game, 8 receptions in that game. So they went from basically ignoring this guy up until week 11. He didn't have a single game over 2 receptions. He just wasn't a part of the offense. And then they were finally like, hey, we have a pretty dynamic playmaker that really is only returning punts for us. Let's figure out more ways to get him the football. And similar to a Rasheed Shaheed in this sense, he's not expensive. Like I said, you're going to be able to get him in a startup in the 12th, 13th round. His ADP is 151 right now. So pretty cheap overall. Dynasty rank wide receiver 74. 74. So if I'm looking at that type of number, I'm saying I think there's a really good chance that he ends up being a much higher value than, a wide receiver 6 or something like that. Like, I think he could crack easily inside the top 4. And if they continue to use him in this very creative role that they are developing with him, I think we could see this be a guy where he's getting 6 to 7 touches a game. Now, I'm not saying receptions, but 6 or 7 touches, because we saw towards the end of the year, they started using him a lot on the ground as well. I think he's that chess piece that Sean Payton had been looking for. And I think that's going to continue throughout next season. So I am back in on Marvin Mims, the draft capital, the opportunity, all of that. And then the price, I think, is all there for Marvin Mims.
Yeah, I've said in the show now for a year, about Marvin Mims. Obviously, I was a little premature because I was saying before the year I was a big fan of kind of preaching him. The fact that he was Sean Payton's first pick as the Denver Broncos head coach. I took him in the second round a couple of years ago. Dynamic speed, 4.38 runner, all pro returner as well. So you're right, Garrett. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of competition as well. Like Courtland Sutton, we don't even know what the future is with Courtland Sutton. Is it even in Denver? Most likely it will be there with Bo Nix, but there's a lot of upside here, and the value is just almost free. Like Marvin Mims, he's 3rd round pick potential. And if you're looking for some depth at receiver, just a great upside player that can really stretch the field. And like you said, be manufactured touches, right? Like, what do you want from any kind of fantasy player? You want as many touches as possible. So they're going to start manufacturing a lot of end arounds, set them up for some short screens here with Bo Nix, put them out in the flat. Then this is definitely a player that can, again, might only get 8 touches a game, but I could bust 3 of those off for 80 yards and a touchdown. Yep. So
and that's
a really dynamic player.
You look at what Bo Nix was good at in college, and it was him getting the ball out, distributing to guys that made plays. And Mims is a playmaker, and I think you broke it down perfectly, Garrett. They kind of started him off on gadgety type of stuff. They were looking for what Sean Payton called a joker player. So they started playing him in the backfield in a joker position out of a running back position, just to kind of get some momentum going kind of for him. And then after that, he kind of blossomed into a bigger part of their offense, which is obviously, how they probably are going to envision him next season is just starting off at that endpoint and kind of even probably growing even from there, and then actually coming in and getting that joker piece at either running back or tight end. That he specifically said he wanted one of those two positions to kind of be a joker type player where that you can really catch passes and out of those spots. So it's going to be interesting. That whole offense as a whole is pretty interesting. I'll have a little something to say later on one of those guys as well. So we'll save that for a little bit later.
All right, before we get into our sells, let me sell you on some My FFPC orphans, because that's what it is. It's orphan season over there. We just mentioned it's February. You might not have a lot going on in Dynasty, and you might be looking for a new endeavor. And right now, My FFPC, they can give you just that. You can go in there. They have a ton of orphans to choose from, any kind of format, whether it be, super flex, standard, PPR, the try super flex, Roto Viz leagues out there. They have a ton. And it's a league that gives you the most highest stakes possible out there, right? Like a lot of times you'll be in a league with somebody and you say, hey man, like I really like Dynasty. Anybody want to play for like $500, $1,000 a year? And maybe some of your friends are like, no, dude, I like Dynasty, but not that much. Or like, hey man, I got rent and daycare to pay for. So for you, sometimes it's hard to like play in those higher expensive leagues, and My FFPC can give you those with the security that it won't fold, right? You could build for the future. You could build a team any way you want, and it's there because the league has never folded since they existed. So right now, you get out there, go to myffpc.com. It's myffpc.com. Use the promo code NERDS. You're going to get $25 off anything you see on there, any of your first purchase of a team, any kind of league you want to do. No startups quite yet. We're going to get through the orphans first. Check them out, myffpc.com. Use the promo code NERDS. Cash money.
So you guys want to just go right into my buy or my sell here, since we're already talking.
It matches up nice.
Since we're already talking Denver. So my sell here is going to be Courtland Sutton. Obviously last year he kind of started off a little bit slow, but he ended up finishing as wide receiver 14, kind of as Bo Nix came into his own. We saw him kind of blossom as well. And he actually ended up having his best year since 2019. That was his second year in the league. And this was the first time he's cracked 1,000 yards since then as well. So it was definitely a banner year for him. Age 29, so we'll be playing next year at age 30. And I believe that, everything's going in the right direction. So this isn't one of those sells where I just think, get out from underneath a guy before he's, he falls on a cliff. I don't think he's ready for that yet, but I'm not sure if there aren't other better players. I wasn't sure I didn't know that Garrett was going to talk about Mims, as his buy, but I do like where Mims is going. And I think, the fact that the coach comes out and says, I think we're good at the wide receiver position, but I think we need these other like kind of explosive pieces, because that's not Courtland Sutton. He's a toss it up to him type of guy. He's a chain mover. He can get downfield. He's not going to separate much, but you can throw him the ball down there and he can go make plays. I think Sean Payton didn't handpick Courtland Sutton. He was on the roster and he's making the best of a good player, but I just think he wants some stuff that he's familiar with, some explosive type players at some other positions. So I think once those guys are on the roster, which I would expect him to get at least a tight end this year or running back, if not one at each of those positions. Once those guys get up and established, I think we're going to see Courtland Sutton kind of go back to what he was in the years between 2019 and 2024, where he was a good player, but he wasn't wide receiver 14. He wasn't touching or getting close to that wide receiver 1 type of stratosphere. And I think in the right situation, you can if you sell him at the right time, maybe to somebody who's a wide receiver away, they're on the clock, they're in their rookie draft, and they're seeing that, man, this this rookie class is not very good. I'm not going to get what I need out of this rookie wide receiver because they're just not ready. They're not that good. They didn't get drafted as high as I thought they were going to get drafted. You might be able to get rid of a Courtland Sutton in that type of scenario at a peak before Denver comes in and gets a new hotness in their offense and he kind of fades back into the background. So I just want to kind of get out from underneath Sutton before he just goes back to what he was, which wasn't bad. It's just not great.
Yeah, like wide receiver 3-ish. He's kind of player. So if you have him and like you need to start Courtland Sutton, obviously you're not moving Courtland Sutton. But like if he's like your wide receiver 5, wide receiver 4, but you're comfortable with wide receiver 5, he's a perfect add-on. He's not the easiest player to go out there and say, hey, I'll give you Courtland Sutton for this. Most people are gonna be like, dude, I don't really want Courtland Sutton that bad.
If you couldn't unload him at the end of last year for whatever reason, the stars didn't align. Maybe they will this off season. I would try to do it before midway through next season. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it doesn't have to be at that draft, but that might be your best time to do it. Because if you unload
when I was going that, man, I was saying he's like, you just can't offer that straight up. I think his best value is like, he's a perfect add-on, right? Like he doesn't really hold any long-term value to you. You're hoping to get the 2025 season out. And for one season, again, if you could afford the loss, like he's a perfect, like, even if you want to do something silly where like, hey, get in the Dynasty Nerds GM, right? Go into League Analyzer, see who needs, put it in contender mode and see who needs what receivers the most. And you go out there and say they have 2-2 and you have 2-7. Like, hey, I'll give you Courtland Sutton and 2-7 for 2-2. Like that's a big jump 5 spots. Like that could be that you're going to get a player that you significantly like more than who'd be available at 2-5. And that's going to be a much long-term upside. Right. And it's still a chance to get immediately hit. Definitely this deep running back class. So I think Courtland Sutton for me is like, yeah, it's not the easiest sale to go out there and to sell Courtland Sutton for his age, but he's a great add-on price for the right team. And I used at the end of the season. I identified that I had Courtland Sutton on 2 rosters where like I could afford to lose him at the time. So I went and go ahead and traded him away for, again, just trying to move up or whatever I needed at the time of return. So definitely a good get off your roster guy off a pinnacle year nonetheless.
Don, I think that's what's key.
I'm torn on this one. I feel similar to the Jeudy, where I do think that we've probably seen the best of Courtland Sutton. And anytime you sell a guy high, I don't think that's a bad idea. But coming into his age 30 season, right now, he's right around wide receiver 50. So people are kind of viewing him as this wide receiver 4. And at that price tag, I might be able to get a year or 2 as a wide receiver 2 or 3. So like, I don't know. I understand, like I said, I understand the logic behind it. I just don't know if the price is worth it for what I'll get in return.
He is going into the last year of his deal as well, which can be good and bad. Like he could be hustling his butt off this year because he's in the last year of his deal. But it could also be bad because he could go somewhere and it won't be as fruitful afterwards. So he's a little bit
31, going on 32 at that point as well.
Yeah, I know. But we always talk about it. Lately we've been talking. It's not the death sentence it used to be, and he was never like a really fast guy to begin with. So as long as he doesn't start breaking down physically, then I think he still has probably 3 years left in him, which it can, you could do a lot of damage in 3 years if he's at that wide receiver 14 that he finished last season. So it's difficult. I just don't see it happening personally. So that's why I feel like it's kind of time.
I also like what you said. I think the biggest thing here that worries me about Courtland Sutton, Matt, too, get on your side here is what you said earlier about it is I'm not necessarily worried about like Courtland Sutton, right? Like he's a solid player. Coming to SU, he was always a solid player. Hasn't turned out to be a great fantasy player, but always a really solid wide receiver. You put him in Sean Payton's offense. Sean Payton runs a really, really good offense, right? He comes out here show his best year ever. But kind of going back to Garrett's buy as well, like then all of a sudden in the year you see the emergence of Marvin Mims. You come out and see Sean Payton say, hey, we're good at the receiver position. They want to add a tight end to this roster. We know how much he uses like tight end. So say they take a tight end in the first round. Like they grab one of those guys there. And then they grab like a Quinn. Say they grab like, say somehow they get Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland, take him in the first, and then the second they take Quinshon Judkins, right? That's changing the whole dynamic scheme of that offense that Sean Payton's going to run. And you already know how he likes to use Mims. He likes Mims. The team's invested in draft capital wise, and he's younger. And then you have Courtland Sutton. That's what hurts him the most. So I think even Courtland Sutton coming back in this Denver offense, if he stays, you're more likely than not, with the emergence of all this other young talent at the receiver position, to get that at best, in my opinion, wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2, more likely falls in that you hope he's a wide receiver 3 range, which is very replaceable. And the last tough. And that's when I said, Garrett, like what you said, it's not the easiest player to get rid of at that value of his ADP. That's why I'm saying the best thing is to, like, even if you could just move up a couple spots in Dynasty. And I know what you're saying too, like, hey, you might, for that value, you might just want to ride that out. And you're right. And if that's what you believe, if you believe he could give you something, that's fine. But that's like, it's almost just like a rookie pick anyways, right? Like this can go 50-50. Sure. This can go like, sure, he does give you another good year, at least one, which is then it's a win. And if you win a championship. But and it also just be like, he doesn't do anything this much this year. He's low end wide receiver 3, and then it's over. And you're like, oh man, I could have got like, then you look back at that draft class and say you got running back number 12, and you could have got running back 5, wide receiver 3, tight end 2 overall, quarterback 3 in a rookie draft. It's just sometimes you just got to know when to pull the pin, and I'm totally okay with the history of Courtland Sutton of pulling the pin.
Good analogy.
All right, so
that one.
Do you go or do I go now, Rich?
No, go ahead. Knock it out of the park.
All right.
You're the guy with the baseball bat running around here trying to hit people out, just trying to get a good meal of brains.
Let's go, big babe. Let's get.
All right. So this is a weird one for me because he went from the guy that I bought the most this offseason to a guy that I've now turned around and said, hey, I now think it is time to sell. And it just once again goes back to, we are not necessarily saying we don't like these players or we love these players. Sometimes we do, but for the most part, we're more worried about this is how this player is valued, and I think that's too high or too low. And so Terry McLaurin went from a guy that I thought was way too low, especially with Jaden Daniels coming in, to a player that now I think has gone a little bit too high. And I wasn't there at first, but when I started digging in to the stats more, this past year, Terry McLaurin was second in the NFL in touchdown receptions with 13 touchdowns, which is an absurd number. Jamar Chase had 17. But when you look at Terry McLaurin's career, his most was 7 in his rookie campaign. Since then, he's never had more than 5. Now, granted, you added a much better quarterback, and so that makes a lot of sense. But you also look at a lot of the other numbers. Yards-wise, he was at 1,096. Pretty average for his career. 919, 11, 1,118, 1,053, 1,191, 1,002, and then this year, 1,096. So basically just par for the course on yards. Receptions, 82. He had 79 the year before. So it wasn't like he had a huge bump in receptions. He actually had fewer targets at 117. He had 132 the year before. And he had very similar yards to what he's always had. The big difference was he went from 4 receiving touchdowns to 13. Now, we know that touchdowns can be a little bit fluky. You have a better shot of them in good offenses. But I went to the second part of this argument for me was looking at the red zone. In the red zone this past year, he had 10 receiving touchdowns of those 13, 10 of them. Now, normally you're like, okay, that's a good thing, right? Well, he only had 14 targets in the red zone. He turned 14 targets into 10 touchdowns. For what it's worth, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 9 touchdowns. It took him 31 targets to get to 9. Jamar Chase,
Terry's better.
35 to get 8. Other guys with high target numbers down there. 24 for Devontae Adams. He only had 6. Justin Jefferson, 25 targets, only had 6. 24 for T. Higgins, only 7 touchdowns. So what I'm saying here is this is just not sustainable. There is no way he's going to continue to be able to put up these types of numbers, especially with what I think is a very high likelihood of them adding either a receiver, a tight end, or maybe there's even a chance they do both. Like, I think there is more added to this offense, especially knowing that they have to go up against the Super Bowl champion Eagles year in, year out. They're going to be adding pieces to this offense. So for me, as much as I love Terry McLaurin, and I was so happy to see him do so well this year, and I had him on a lot of teams, it's time to turn around, flip the script, and sell him right now. His ADP is 78. So you're looking at end of the 6th, beginning of the 7th round type of asset. I think you could probably get pretty good value for him to sell him to contender right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it all depends what you're going to get, right? I kind of feel like everything you said about Courtland Sutton, why you want to stick around. Like, I'll take 2 more years at Terry there, and listen, that touchdown stuff, that's Jaden Daniels slander, and I just want to allow it on the show. He's just too good. He arguably the number 1 Superflex player out there today.
For what it's worth, the difference in ADP though is 136 to 78, like 50 picks different. So that's the difference between the two guys, is what you get in return for Terry versus what you get from Courtland.
Yeah, that is definitely a massive difference, but you're also going to probably get way more out of Terry, because, I mean, if you look at those touchdown numbers, you're looking at it as like a glass kind of half empty or like 3/4 empty, where I'm looking at it, it's like, that's a lot of vodka. And
I sold both these guys, by the way, this year in a package to get Brian Thomas, and it was amazing.
What a win. What a win. I just want to know is, like, what are you going to do? Like, he had 14 targets. Like, what happens when he gets 24 targets in 2025? Like, that's a lot of tutties.
20 touchdowns.
I mean, 13 is a lucky number. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good one, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite floor to sleep on at the hotel.
Is it really?
Most of them don't even have them.
Yeah,
I was saying, that's a big hotel.
That's so stupid. It's still the 13th floor. It doesn't matter what you
sure
call it. I can do arithmetic. Come on. Come on. All right. Are we on the last guy now?
We are, dude.
I'm the last guy.
All right. My wide receiver sell is Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. And, like, when I first thought about it, I thought people were like, "Oh yeah, dude, like, yeah, I mean, come on, this is an end for Tyreek Hill." And then I look at his most recent ADP. His ADP is wide receiver 16 overall, and I like Tyreek Hill. I think he still has a chance to come out here and have a really, really good year. But when a guy whose game's predicated on speed, like, dude, he's closer to sprint to the retirement home than to the first place in the race. So for me, Tyreek Hill, like, you don't see many wide receivers going in the year 31. For their games predicated on speed, and be wide receiver 16 overall. There's just so many wide receivers behind him that I value. Guys like Romo Dunze, Rashid Rice, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore. Well, I mean, you can argue DJ Moore. I do feel good about him more years wise, but Zay Flowers. I think there's even a case for like a guy like DK Metcalf and Xavier Reed, if you're still believing Jaden Reed. So for me, look at Tyreek Hill, and when you go back to this past season, Tyreek Hill had a really down year. And you can make a lot of excuses for why he had a down year, but like his receptions were down drastically. He was down. He only had 71 receptions, had 119 the year before. He had 987 receiving yards, almost 1,000 less receiving yards they had in 2023, where he had 1,799. He only scored 7 touchdowns compared to 13. And the big thing here is he was wide receiver 18 overall. He had 218.2 PPR points. He only averaged 12.8 points per game. That's very mid. And I know he said he had that wrist injury, and he's possibly get surgery on it. We see a guy who comes out here at the end of the year, has this huge tirade, who has no guaranteed money left on his contract as well. Like, he wants to leave. They say they squashed that pretty quickly. All that could really mean is like, hey, don't worry, Tyreek, we'll trade you, but in return, you just got to be cool. Like, everything's cool up until that point, so you don't hurt your trade value, puts in a bad position. We will trade you, but you say you're happy in Miami. That's the deal. So that's more than likely than not, in my opinion. So forget a guy who just had a down year, who got hurt, who's going to be 31, when the season starts. You don't see guys, even like GOATs, like Julio Jones, who was like unguardable, right? Like he had 31, all of a sudden he was he was like Muggsy Bogues at 45 years old in 2024 NBA. Like it's like, yeah, very guardable. You know what I mean? So for me, this is it's looking at his ADP right now and thinking that's so overvalued. And in my eyes, like it goes one of those trades where you say, hey, I'm gonna offer this trade. It probably won't go through because like he's 31 years old, but that ADP, those are kind of trades you send out there, and you could like you send Tyreek Hill in a first for like Garrett Wilson. You know, I mean, and it gets the deal done. So I'm all over the Tyreek Hill sell train if it can be done. I'm still having doubts. Like I truly don't believe the ADP of 16. Like I'm that wide a gap of a mouth.
Well, where do you have him? I have him at wide receiver 22, and even that feels a little bit high.
And I have the Dynasty Nerds app on ADP.
No. Where do you have him ranked? I mean,
where do I have
him ranked at 22, and even that feels a little high.
I didn't know you were going to surprise me. These surprise
questions.
Like this. I'm looking at ADP. I had to go to a completely different thing for rankings. I have Tyreek Hill as my. Really, I'm still scrolling. Wide receiver 32.
Okay.
I have him behind Chris Olave, right ahead of Ricky Pearsall. But hey, if you have Ricky Pearsall and you want to set with the Deebo Samuel, for sure getting traded news, like what do you offer me for what Ricky Pearsall and what for Tyreek Hill? Yeah. Good looking sandwich can get this deal cut and done here. I kind of believe it.
Where do you guys have him? I think
I have him at 22. Rich him at 32.
33.
I'm at 20.
Sorry.
I'm at 24. All right.
Okay. But still, if you can get him, honestly, like even I'm looking at 22 when I'm looking at guys right behind him, like I should probably move him back a spot or two because I'd probably still rather DJ Moore. I'd probably still rather Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
Jordan Addison's close.
Dude, if you can get Jerry Jeudy in a first, you guys are all the haters on Jerry Jeudy. Meanwhile, back in the
I don't think you can get Jerry Jeudy in a first for Tyreek.
You don't think so?
I don't think. I mean, maybe worth a shot.
Honestly,
I would take a first for Tyreek Hill. I don't even need Jerry Jeudy. I would just take.
I would take a first for Tyreek Hill.
I would take 112.
Well, it depends. Again, if I'm like a contender and I need Tyreek Hill, like I'm not just taking a first and get him on my roster.
In this class, I'll take 112. Like I'll take 112.
Yeah, but then if you're a contender now, you don't have Tyreek Hill on your team.
I'll take 112.
Well, how are you gonna contend?
How are you going to contend?
Sexy running backs, baby.
With your rookie running back 6?
In this class, the sixth running back might be running back 18 on the year. Like this
the 12th pick,
nasty.
you just won your league. Obviously, your running backs are good enough. Obviously, I guess Tyreek didn't play. Tyreek Hill didn't play in the playoffs.
See, he didn't help me then.
Won your league at 12. He didn't help you then too. So hey, if you can't help me when I need you most, good riddance.
See ya.
All right, so those are our buy episodes. Buy and sells for the wide receivers. We'll be back tomorrow with our tight ends. So that should be kind of fun. We'll see if Matt can make it. His voice is, we'll see how he feels. We'll get a thermometer in that hole.
His cheeks are rosy. We'll see. I don't know.
They are. They are. Thank you for noticing that.
I can tell you're sick. You get the rosy cheeks. That's tell.
It is. Adios.
Hey, Nerd Herd, Dynasty Nerds has an incredible new offer from Underdog Fantasy for new customers. When you sign up as a new customer, you'll get a chance at their new customer free pick. But that's not all. Underdog is also offering incredible deposit bonuses. Use the promo code NERDS when you first sign up, and Underdog will give you up to $1,000 in bonus cash with your first deposit. That's right, $1,000 to kickstart your fantasy football journey. Don't miss out on this fantastic opportunity. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app. Sign up today with promo code NERDS and start your journey to fantasy football glory today. Must be 18, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. And in Tennessee, call 1-800-889-9789.